Welcome to the Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting of July 9th, 2008. We have our regular agenda. Would you call roll, please, Sheila? Thank you.
Commissioner Chan.
Here.
Commissioner Foley.
Present.
Commissioner Miller.
Present.
Commissioner Yao.
Present.
And the next item we have here is on the consent items. We have the consideration of the minutes of June 2nd. Did anyone have any changes to those minutes? I did have a question regarding one of the words used in the second paragraph in the final sentence. It says GWP customers will be aptly notified of this rate increase. Was that meant to be promptly, or?
Promptly, yes.
Okay. All right, we should probably...
And aptly, but also promptly.
Okay. Well, perhaps we should correct that word then. That's the only change I would recommend.
Okay.
Do we have a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All not in favor? Well, so accepted. Our next item is... go ahead.
Introduction, Ms. Terry Chan.
Hi, yes, it's my honor to serve on the commission. Being a Glendale resident for over 20 years, I continue to be impressed with the progress that the Glendale Water and Power Utility has made in the areas of power and water service reliability, customer service, and environmental stewardship. As an electrical engineer myself, I am familiar with the complexity and the demands on meeting all the energy needs of the city. Being a huge advocate for the environment, I have personally taken many steps toward conservation, including installing solar photovoltaic panels at my home. And I'm really pleased to see that Glendale Water and Power offer many programs that allows all of us to reduce greenhouse gases. This is an exciting time to be in the energy business, especially rewarding for me to serve on this commission because I will be able to participate in this very important decision-making process, and which will shape our future and many generations after.
Well, thank you for joining us. And go ahead, Director.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to welcome Ms. Chan, and your interest in GWP are well appreciated, and I'm sure you're going to be a good addition to our commission. As always, we're here to offer whatever information we can get you, and also to do what you might think would be the right thing to do here in Glendale. We're an integral part of the community. We're very proud of that, and anything we can do to help our customers, that's why we're here. So again, thank you very much, and welcome. I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. Next item, we have reports, and I'll turn it over to Director Steiger.
Thank you, Chairman Miller. First of all, most important, at the next meeting, assuming that we will have all 5 commissioners here, we'd like to be able to take a picture. First things first.
All right.
Well, we have all 5 commissioners here at one time. Secondly, I'd like to just report upon the status of our strategic planning process, and I am pleased to announce, and you'll notice that a few of us here look a little bit bleary-eyed because we've just finished a 6-hour process within the last half hour of our first major strategic planning session. There will be a number of them over the next 3 months. We, just to give you a little bit of a sense of where we are, we've identified a number of stakeholders to be interviewed along with all of our employee base. We have scheduled, or we will be scheduling, 27 meetings for both employees and stakeholders throughout the community and with our governmental entities to get as much input as we possibly can toward what the important issues for GWP are and will be, and what direction we need to take moving forward. So I'm very, very pleased with how the process is now been initiated, and I'll be reporting to you for the next couple of months in terms of where we are in the process. You will be an integral part of that process. We'll be notifying you as to what that actually means, but I'm very, very pleased at this point anyway as to where we are. So that's a status report for now.
Very good. Any questions? I did want to ask, is there a schedule available regarding how this will take place?
There will be, as of, I should have it Monday. There will be a very, very detailed schedule, actually, in terms of the meetings. We actually have two sets of process meetings. One is for the design team, and the design team is the core team that met today, for example, that will meet all the way through the process. We are the cohesive group that will coordinate all of the stakeholder meetings, assimilate the data, start to work on the actual reports themselves, and then bring them to you, to City Council, City Manager. But the design team will stay intact the entire time. So there will be a schedule of design team meetings and then a schedule of stakeholder meetings that will stretch from now through September. So I will have that by Monday.
We'll be hearing a report of it at the next meeting, I
Yes,
assume.
absolutely.
Okay,
Yep.
very good. All right.
Okay, the
Item.
next thing I'd like to do is give you a brief update on our budget. And I just have a couple of slides, bear with me. Just to, while we're getting the slides up, to give you a sense of where we are at GWP. We've just concluded about 3 months of very, very intensive budget negotiations, development, cutbacks, pretty much everything you can imagine in a year where we're seeing increasing pressure upon us in all areas of cost, primarily fuels, of course, and we'll talk about that in a minute, but in all areas. And I'm pleased to be able to present to you today a balanced budget that will serve us well in the next year and then for the following year also, based on what we know today. And it holds our base rate flat, but unfortunately does not hold our fuel adjustment charge flat. I'd like to say that, but unfortunately, given the upward pressure of fuels that we're seeing right now, that will not be the case. So I'm pleased to say we've done a very, very good job of cutting back inside GWP. The transfer from GWP to the city was increased slightly this year, so we've also provided additional funding to the city, but we've still been able to provide a balanced budget going forward. Hey, Dave. And just briefly, to outline some of the challenges and opportunities that we looked at, the biggest single challenge, which continues even more so than when we first started our budget process just a few months ago, is the issue of the adjustable rate increase on the electric side. It's driven by a significant increase in natural gas, coal, and purchased power pricing that we've seen over the last 3 to 4 months, and we will continue to see. That's our biggest challenge for the time being, and has also presented the single largest increase in the overall rate structure, and I'll show you that in a second in terms of the actual budget impact. The other large issue that looms ahead of us in the near term is the cost associated, or the potential cost associated, with the greenhouse gas auction. It would appear that as we move forward into greenhouse gas mitigation with California laws now in place and the potential federal laws that may very well be put in place over the next year or two, that we'll be faced with an auction process that will allocate carbon credits to us, but then require us to buy additional carbon credits on the open market through an auction process. It's not been determined exactly how that's going to work, but regardless, what we do know is, based on our current carbon footprint, we will most likely have to be in that auction process, which could add anywhere from from $5 to $10 million per year in additional carbon auction costs. That's substantial, and that's beyond the budget that we're going to talk about today. So that's a concern for us. It's something we're working on. We've made substantial progress at the state level in terms of making it very clear that, while we certainly agree that greenhouse gas must be mitigated, that there are other viable ways of doing it that will provide the same mitigation at far less cost. The primary one, of course, is renewables, and at the same time, along with renewables, as a concentrated effort on efficiency. Whoop, not yet. Decisions on our current and future generation assets is also critical at this point. As you know, we have a a significant generation asset in our Grayson units. Some of them are reaching the end of their useful life. We've rebuilt a number of them, and we're finally coming to the point where some of them will have to be retired, and we need to make some decisions going forward as to what the right investment in generation should be. And that's based on a number of unknowns right now, not the least of which, again, is mitigation on greenhouse gas and what will make sense for us moving ahead in terms of greenhouse gas, the volatility in carbon-based fuels. So that issue looms as something that we need to deal with during this current budget year. So we'll be coming back to you as we move along with certain recommendations, probably in the next 6 to 9 months in that regard. Along with that, equipment costs continue to escalate. If we were to build a new generating station today, regardless of whether it would be a combined cycle or gas turbine, the costs have gone up over the last 2 years, over 50%. That's a significant number. That's something we need to deal with, and that becomes part of that decision-making process. On the water side, again, similar to the issues on the electric side, are upward pressure on us for bulk water supply. We've been notified by Metropolitan Water District that we will see a 14% increase in rates starting next year. We are preparing for that now, but the cost of water does continue to escalate, and we account for it through the adjustable piece of our water rate. So it is putting upward pressure on the water side also. Just as we've done on electric, we've held base rates flat on the water side also for right now. The other issue which will have great impact on water conservation and supply is for us to find significant avenues for increased sales of recycled water. And as you're well aware, the biggest single issue there is the cost of providing the infrastructure for the recycled water. But we are looking at that, and it's a challenge for us, but it's one that we will solve. Now, to give you a snapshot of our budget situation that we've just concluded, and we are now into the 2008-2009 budget year. Essentially, if you take a look at this chart, this will give you a pretty good overview of what I have just been discussing. We separate our rate into a base rate, which essentially covers our fixed charges, our operation and maintenance charges, our capital expenditures, and so on, and an adjustable rate, which covers the cost of purchased power and fuels. This particular snapshot shows where we've been for the last 2 years and where we expect to be in the next 2 years. You can see that we are proposing base rate revenues, an increase in base rate revenues based strictly on load growth. Okay, so the increase, for example, over the projected 07-08 to the proposed, which is now the actual 08-09 budget, from $120 million to $124 million, is based strictly on load growth. Things like the Americana, on more flat screen TVs, all the kinds of things that add to demand on our system. The adjustable rate revenues, and if you take a look again from 07-08 projected, 08-09 actual budget, goes from $65 million to $88 million. That is a significant jump, and that represents at this point our forecast based on the kinds of increases we've seen recently and we expect to see over the coming year. If we continue to see the volatility in the market that we've been seeing, that could actually be a little bit low. Finally, on the revenue side, you see that we've estimated $3.9 million in wholesale revenues. That's a result of how we optimize the Grayson units and how we sell power and ancillary services back into the market at opportune times. We actually think that $3.9 million could be a little bit low. We think we can do better than that. And in fact, our goal is to do substantially better than that, but we're taking a more conservative approach at this point. Our total revenue proposed number for 08-09 is $216,700,000. That's balanced off with expenses of $213, which leaves us with about $3 million of net income, which will go into the reserves. And of course, the reserves have been bolstered by the bond issue earlier this year, which has been put in place already to help with a number of our capital improvement projects. So you'll see that right now for this year, we show a reserve all the way down at the end year-end cash balance of about $116 million. That drops to $87 million next year because a portion of that is the bond dollars that we have here in reserve that we will spend this year on capital projects. So we will be over time rebuilding the. If we took this out for another 5 years, you'd see that the cash balance reserves would start to come up back to about 110 to 120 million, which is roughly where we should be. So that's what we're building that fund back up to. The transfer, as I mentioned, has gone up this year, and that's transfer to general fund. And on the electric side, for this year, it's a little over $19 million. So that's a snapshot of the budget for electric for this year. For next year, you can see what the numbers are. Again, we've projected an increase in revenue based, at this point, pretty much solely on demand. We have a lower adjustable rate revenue number, but at this point I would say that's a little suspect, and we'll see how that actually plays out based on where the market goes. But overall, the philosophy of keeping rates as flat as we possibly can on the fixed part of the rate continues. And we are projecting a slight increase in transfer to general fund for next year also.
Excuse me, Mr. Steiger.
Sure.
I just have a quick question.
Sure.
On the adjustable rate revenue, it appears that in 2006 and 7 to 8, there seems to be a to 65 million, but since there's going to be quite a bit of jump starting this period, what can we do to mitigate that jump? I mean, I'm not sure if I remember last year what was discussed, what that number was, but it seems like we can do something about it. And can we do some kind of hedging or buying power forward, or do something so that becomes more stable?
Yes, in fact, we already do some of that. Starting next month, we will be, in fact, it goes to council next week. We will be working with a trading firm that will be doing our trading to start to do hedging both on the natural gas side for our own units, along with the purchase power side. So we'll be doing two hedging processes, which will start to slightly mitigate that. It's going to take a while to mitigate that kind of extreme increase, but yes, we're putting a number of things in place.
What did we do in the past?
Well, we've done some forward purchases in the past, okay, but we're getting much more aggressive on it now.
Okay. But then it seems like we didn't anticipate this jump.
We anticipated some of it, but not to the extent that we've seen. You're right. You're 100% right. Yeah.
A question about your amount going into reserves for this year. It's an increase of over threefold from the previous year.
That is the bond money that went into it's the bond money that is now shows in reserves. Okay, but that gets moved down as we use it. So that's why if you notice between 08-09 and 09-010, it actually drops down because we're actually spending the money this year. That's the bond money.
Okay. We'll be hearing about the capital program more next meeting, I think.
We can certainly do that, yep.
Yeah, okay.
We will do that. On the water side, very similar type issues. We had a rate increase earlier this year, as I'm sure you're aware. So the base rate revenues have gone up to $26 million for 08-09. The adjustable rate revenue numbers are up because we've proposed an increase in the adjustable rate to accommodate two things. One, the increase in water from Metropolitan Water District, and two, the increased pumping costs. Since we now have an increase on the electric side, that translates into additional pumping costs on the water side, unfortunately. So revenues are up substantially on the water side to almost $44 million. Fortunately, it's a well-balanced budget, so all parts of that budget balance out. We have revenues of $26 million versus expenditures of $24 million on the base rate, and on the adjustable, it pretty much balances out one for one. We have a net income in the water side of just under $2 million, which will also go into reserves. And of course, reserves have been minimal in the last couple of years. There, again, you'll see some jumps in our year-end cash balance. Again, it's a direct result of the bonding on the water side.
Right.
And so what we will pretty much come down to almost no reserve and then start to build it up. So we are coming out of a cycle where the reserves dropped very low, and we're now building them back up again.
I recall from previous meetings that the reserves were actually very far below the target level. When do we anticipate we might actually get back to the target?
The target it'll be at least 5 years,
At least 5
but it'll
years,
be
okay.
on an upward trend every year, so that's
Okay,
the good
all
news.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And that's an overview of our budget moving forward, and I will have the capital improvement budget and projections for you next month.
Sorry, I do have a small question.
Sure.
I guess we announced that we're going to have a rate increase, electric rate
We
increase
did.
July 1st.
Yes.
So based on these projections, what kind of announcements in the future can we make to mitigate the impact to customers' rates? I mean, can we do something in terms of communications, or what can we do to show that we're doing all we can to maybe not have major increases in the future?
What we're doing right now is we're getting out to community groups and business groups, large customers, and we're explaining what's creating the increase in rates, and explaining the difference between the fuel adjustment and the base rate. So first of all, so customers understand that, and it's not unusual at all that customers don't understand that. In fact, to put it in perspective, the electric fuel adjustment went up about 27%. It's a large increase on fuel. Base rate went up 0, so the net result's about a 9% increase. So when we go out, we talk about this, but then we say what that really means to you is it's a 9% increase. And the best way, of course, to mitigate it from the customer standpoint is to conserve, to be efficient. So we are accelerating our public discussion and notification on efficiency. We're looking to see what other programs we can put in place to help with efficiencies from our public benefit charge. But for the moment, the main thing is we're educating customers on trying to be as efficient as possible, using things like the compact fluorescent lighting, which uses far, far less than the normal incandescent lighting, raising the temperature on their air conditioning, things like that. And in some cases, very basic items. But that's where we are as of right now. As we move forward, we're going to see what we can do, as you mentioned, to mitigate the price increases. But I think, regardless of what we do, for the foreseeable future, pricing will be relatively high.
I have a question.
Sure.
I know that some customers are concerned with the mercury content in the CFLs, and I understand some utilities are designing a strategy in terms of waste and disposal. Do we have anything like that in Glendale Water?
I don't believe we've done anything like that yet. Not yet, but I know that's an issue.
Yes. I understand now what we recommend is hazardous waste.
Yes.
Yes. But if there is some form of a disposal that maybe we can have.
Yep.
Yeah. At the office or headquarters here, or the different areas, different districts, may be helpful.
Yes, we'll look at that. Absolutely.
Let's go ahead.
And Mr. Steiger, could you maybe educate me at least on how often we revise the rates? Is it every 6 months?
Every 6 months.
Every 6 months.
Yeah, the way it works is the base rate, of course, is something that if we were to revise that, we would have to go to City Council and get approval for that. The fuel adjustment piece is administratively handled. So every 6 months, we review it, and then we make an adjustment at that point based on what we've just seen in terms of pricing and what we forecast. So it's a 6-month backward and forward projection type of thing, and then it's done administratively, so we put it in place at that time. So the next time we will look at that will be in January of '09.
But I guess my misunderstanding is, why is there such a big increase since it gets adjusted every 6 months? Couldn't we tell in advance, 6 months before, that what the rate would be instead of making that big adjustment? I mean, I assume adjustments might be within 1 or 2%, but having this 9 or 10% is quite dramatic.
Well, I know if you look at the price of gas 6 months ago versus where it is today, we're looking at gas, we're looking at purchase power, we're looking at coal. It's gone up substantially, and then we also have to forecast out a little bit too. So we do both. So I have to say that we did not expect the type of increase that we've seen in the last, say, 3 to 4 months.
But I guess, as you mentioned, there's some kind of hedging mechanism that you're going to City Council with. Couldn't that be done? We have known that gas, that we needed the power 6 months from now, that we buy gas whatever that price was, instead of buying in the spot market. It seems like the spot market price has gone up dramatically.
Yeah, it has. Mm-hmm.
But if we had hedged it back then, wouldn't that price be stable?
Well, we do a little bit of hedging, but we don't do significant hedging, and now we will, but we haven't, no.
Okay.
You're right.
But maybe in the future, I would like to get some kind of idea of what that program looked like.
Sure.
Once you've gone to City Council.
Yeah, we'll bring it to you at the next meeting, actually. We can show you what it is that we're putting in place and how it will work.
Oh, okay.
I had a question on the same topic. I understand that several years ago we made some past investments in natural gas for hedging purposes. Can you elaborate for the audience how much that may have saved in terms of the costs here, or is that quantifiable at this point?
Well, we own a part of a gas field, so yeah, that's true. And what that does, that gives us a discount based on the index of natural gas. So we have saved due to that. It still goes up. It goes up in relationship to the market,
right,
but we're below it at a certain rate, and I don't recall what the actual rate is. Maybe Ned can help.
Sure.
We did a pre-purchase of landfill of natural gas, which actually started delivery July 1st, and that's a savings of $1 per million BTUs, and we're getting during the summer months 5,000 MMBTUs per day, so it's a savings of about $5,000 a day.
Well, you're to be commended for having the foresight to do that. Other questions? I did have a question on the first slide you had on decisions on current and future generation assets. Do we have a schedule for those decisions, or is that...
We're working, that's part of what we're looking at in the planning process right now.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that something that we could hear about in a future meeting?
I would say probably sometime in the third quarter of this year, we'll be in a better position to talk about that.
Okay. Okay, very good. All right, that's all I have. Were there any other comments? Okay. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Our next item?
MWD presentation.
Good afternoon. I
you
didn't
for
realize
joining
I'd be among familiar faces.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having it.
Yeah.
I used to work at the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. So
Yeah.
I thought you looked familiar.
yeah, I was thinking that as I was going along. So now I feel good about coming here and telling you about what's going on at the Metropolitan Water District and statewide with regard to water issues. And I think it'll help frame current and future discussions that this commission would have regarding water supply conditions, possible rate increases, any of those types of programs that you might see coming before the commission. Just as a brief overview, most of you are familiar with the Metropolitan Water District. Just all I wanted to say was we're a large wholesaler, the primary wholesaler of water to Southern California, 6-county region, 18+ million people in our service area. We have 26 member agencies. Glendale is a member agency, so a direct representative on the Metropolitan Water District, and a 37-member board of directors. We serve about 2 million acre feet a year, which is about half of the total use in Southern California. With that, I'd like to start out by saying you've heard a lot about water supply conditions, maybe crisis, drought, emergency, these types of words being used with water. And so I wanted to start out the presentation by confirming for you that, yes, we are indeed in those types of situations. And I wanted to give you some insight into why this is happening to metropolitan service area, particularly when we spent the last 15 years since the original Integrated Resources Plan at Metropolitan preparing ourselves and creating resources to try and avoid exactly what's happening today. I have a slide here that says, why is this happening? And I start with 2007. I can rewind that just a little bit. Back in 2003, you'll recall that there was a great deal of discussion about California's use of Colorado River water, with the bottom line to that discussion being that California was going to be limited to its basic apportionment of Colorado River water, 4.4 million acre feet. A key aspect of that is that access to surplus and unused water from 2003 forward has been unavailable to the Metropolitan Water District. And so a great deal of storage that could have been stored over the last several years, that water was not available. And that was a manageable situation. And then 2007 happened. And what happened in 2007 is you had basically an unprecedented dry conditions in all of the watersheds that affect Metropolitan Water District supplies. So Northern California, on the Colorado River, in the eastern Sierras, where the Los Angeles aqueduct system draws water from. In the local watershed, in the local basin, you had record dry conditions leading to high demands. So we had challenges on the supply side and high demands in the service area. Still not a huge deal considering the resources that have been built. And then what was layered on top of that are the legal and regulatory challenges that I'm sure you have heard regarding the Delta smelt. The Delta smelt is an endangered species up in the California, Sacramento, San Joaquin Bay Delta. That is basically the water collecting hub for the California State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. There were two separate court cases with different conclusions, but the bottom line is that the current operating rules that we're operating under for state water project supplies limits the amount of state project supplies that can be imported to Southern California, even given good hydrology. So when there is snow, there's less water that can be imported because of the protections that are being afforded to the endangered species, the Delta smelt. That makes for a tough business, because even when what you're counting on happens, i.e. the snow, you may not be able to move the water down for consumptive use or for storage purposes. That creates a problem. And what happened in 2007 is it forced us to start taking a great deal of actions that we don't prefer to take. First one was to interrupt the replenishment program to the local groundwater basins. That's discounted water that goes to supplement groundwater supplies. Second thing was we took a significant amount of water out of our storage reserves. And so you're hearing this around the way that we're using our storage reserves. This is, in fact, started in 2007. We had built up a reserve of close to 3 million acre feet, including emergency reserves that we prefer not to touch. 500,000 acre feet of that was withdrawn in 2007, so 500,000. And when you're talking about 4 million acre feet of total use in the service area in a year, that's quite a bit. So suffice it to say that coming out of 2007, we weren't set up extremely well for 2008, but things being as they were, it started snowing in November, December, and things looked pretty good for a little bit. And then what happened was that the March, April time period, and even May, turned out to be the driest on record in the State Water Project watershed. This, combined with the restrictions that were being put on exports of that water to bring to Southern California, has cost the State Water Project about 500,000 acre feet. Metropolitan, being the 50% holder of State Water contract, is about 250,000 acre feet of water that we couldn't have access to, compounded by the dry hydrology, meaning there wasn't that much water to begin with. So we only had an allocation of 35% of our Table A contract. Our Table A contract with the state is 2 million acre feet, 1.9 million acre feet, so we would only get 35% of that this year. The Los Angeles aqueduct system had the same problem. They thought they were going to have higher deliveries, and then basically Mother Nature shut them off. Down here, it started to rain all the way through February, and then it shut off. So local groundwater basins did not get the type of natural replenishment that they may have been counting on, given the way the year was shaping up. And then, lo and behold, two more major regulatory issues in the legal arena regarding endangered species. The first is Chinook salmon. There was a federal ruling out of the same court, I wouldn't say coincidentally, out of the same court that made the ruling on the Delta smelt. And there's a written ruling that's expected, I think it's this week, on what remedies are going to be put in place to protect Chinook salmon in the Sacramento River system. I'll just point out that at first glance, the actions or remedies being proposed are not going to affect state water project supplies, but there are other actions that the judge may consider that could. We'll find out more as this comes out. Second, the longfin smelt, a cousin to the Delta smelt, was also is now an eligible candidate for listing, which means that protections for the longfin smelt may be added on to the protections that are going on for the Delta smelt. So the bottom line is, what happened in 2007 is going to be repeated in 2008. We weren't able to continue that discounted program to replenish groundwater basins. That natural replenishment to the groundwater basins, like I said, from natural rainfall didn't happen either, so that can create challenges for the local agencies. We discontinued 30% of our interim agricultural water program. That's a discounted water program to ag users. That was cut off by 30%. We invested a great deal of money in water transfers. We are purchasing about 155,000 acre feet of water transfers, and water transfers don't come cheap. We purchase water on a voluntary basis to supplement our water supply, but that puts a big hit on the expenditure side. And then we're projecting that we'll take about 500,000 acre feet out of our storage accounts again. So now 1 million acre feet over 2 years. We're expecting our regional storage to be close, our usable storage, not the emergency storage, but our dry year storage to be close to 1 million acre feet by the end of 2008. So you can see, by looking at this graph here, that the trend for our storage is not positive. It's actually pretty negative. We started back in 2007, withdrew about 500,000, projecting to draw 500,000 or 600,000 again. So that blue piece is what we rely on for reserves, is getting smaller and smaller. And that's the primary concern. We have smaller and smaller reserves and less chance of getting water on a contemporaneous basis as snow falls because of the protections for the smelt. So what are we doing about this? As I mentioned, we spent the last 15 years investing billions of dollars in building resources, so we're going to continue to manage those resources in the most cost-effective and water resource-effective way possible. That includes staying heavily engaged in the transfer markets. Second thing is we have staff heavily engaged in the State Water Project and Delta activities to identify through these what they call biological opinion hearings. You'll hear terms like OCAP. That's where they determine what operations are going to be legal for water exports with smelt protections or endangered species protections, that there's potential near-term improvements that can be put into that process, and that's the avenue we're pursuing now to improve in the short term the amount of water supply that can come down. Heavy investments in conservation, and this takes the place both in conservation outreach. 2007, you started to hear across the airwaves, it's time to get serious about your water use. That was the ad campaign. $6.5 million authorized by our board for that campaign. We also authorized $15 million in what we call the public agency program to promote conservation and recycled water hookups for public agencies, parks, schools, etc., with double the incentive that we would ordinarily do, $500 an acre foot of incentive through that public agency program. So that program is mostly subscribed now, and I'll get to where that's going to go in the near future. You may have started to hear a new ad campaign in the last month or so, cut your water use. Right? Focusing on the outdoor water use, that's the ad campaign that's going on now. It's about $6 million worth of ad campaign. We're expecting that to continue through August and then step up to an even more severe message. So That's coming on at the, not this past board meeting, because that was just 2 days ago. 1 month ago, we also issued a water supply alert, and I'll get into what that is, but that's really basically a regional message that Metropolitan is putting out that, in fact, the situation is serious and that there are certain steps that need to be taken. Met staff is also engaged with its member agencies on something we're calling the 5-year supply plan. This is really a task force-driven, for lack of a better term, crisis-driven process to identify different things that we can invest in the short term that will produce water or conservation savings in the short term, and identify what types of expenditures, what types of rate increase or impacts those things would have to supplement water supply. And I'll have a little bit more detail on that as we go on. So what is a water supply alert? Our board basically authorized a 3-condition communication device here that basically puts us in, when things start to get a little bit serious, we start drawing reserves, we would be in a water supply watch, condition 1. When reserves are being severely depleted, we would be in a water supply alert, and that's in fact what they declared. That last condition is a water supply allocation, something nobody wants to go near, but that's the old school rationing, fines for water and overuse and all that kind of things that are not a lot of fun. So those are the 3 conditions that we're working within. So we're in the most severe condition prior to an allocation. So I just wanted to add the weight of that statement to that. So what is this for? Well, it gives us a vehicle for communicating a regional water supply conditions. I think one of the problems that we have in Southern California and metropolitan service area is everybody has their own water district. The Metropolitan Water District is providing supplemental water supply, but it's hard for the average consumer to understand what's really going on. They hear Governor Schwarzenegger say things, they hear Metropolitan say things, they hear your commission say things, your general manager say things. It's hard for people to put the pieces together, so we tried to add some cohesiveness by saying region-wide in our service area, this is our situation, it's severe. We also passed a board resolution along with this alert, and basically what this does is urge extraordinary actions to encourage conservation with the goal of helping to maintain our storage reserves. So that big decrease in storage that you see, we're trying to stave that off to some extent by getting the messages out on wise and prudent water use. So really 4 parts to that resolution. Enhanced media campaign, I already talked about how we're stepping up that media campaign. Second is to increase public outreach, accepting and taking advantage of invitations like the one you afforded us today to come to talk to you and get the message out to the local agencies on what the situation is and what are the different things that can be done to help. Third is to urge the enactment of local drought ordinances. Metropolitan is a regional agency. We don't have direct local control over any of the water use. What we need to do is cooperate with the local agencies like yours to enact meaningful, workable drought ordinances that identify prohibited water uses and undesirable water uses, and provide any assistance that we can to help you get those into place to help control water use. And then I have a bullet on accelerating local projects, but I'm going to move that to when I detail the 5-year plan. What are some of these immediate actions that we're talking about? From an outreach perspective, we can tell people, here's some areas you can look to save water. And really it has to do with outdoor water use, reducing landscape watering and runoff, fixing indoor and outdoor leaks. So these are all things that you should be doing anyways, but we're going to help remind people these are the things you can do. Cover your swimming pool, get water efficient devices, toilets, the washing machines, all of that type of thing. And if you have a choice, in landscaping, plant California-friendly and drought-tolerant landscapes as opposed to high water-using landscapes. That's a little bit different because that's voluntary, just messaging. A little bit different than urging the ordinances. Ordinances, what we're looking for is for local agencies and entities to pass restrictions on hours of outdoor watering. So say no outdoor watering after 10 o'clock. That's an example of something that would come in an ordinance. To mandate, if possible, conservation-oriented tiered rate structures where higher uses of water would incur higher rates. That's been shown to work in different agencies. Different provisions for water-efficient landscape and new construction. So when new homes are being built, what do they have to put in terms of landscape and irrigation practices? Getting those new type of growth water uses to be as efficient as possible. Prohibitions on irrigation runoff. You'll see when you see people water, They may water too long, too often, and that water runs out into the street. There's nothing, once you pick an efficient landscape, and there's nothing wrong with watering that, but there is something wrong with overwatering and letting that water go. That's what we're trying to target through these, kind of safe and sane, to borrow some 4th of July terms, safe and sane ordinances. And then, hotlines for reporting water use. People call them water cops and drought busters and all kinds of things, but providing mechanisms for people to cooperate in the local, on the local end to find out where these prohibited water uses are. I was talking about the communication kind of difficulties. So what did the governor announce, and how does that impact anything that we're doing? The governor actually had 2 announcements within about a 2-week period, and that can also tend to add confusion because Metropolitan's water supply alert came out in between there. So first thing the governor did in June was declare an official drought, and so he was basing that on information from 2 years of low runoff statewide, coupling with impacts from the Delta smelt remedy. So this is real similar to the things that I told you were causing our issues. He urges conservation and tries to streamline the water transfer process. That's a good thing. That's the governor's drought declaration, so now statewide everybody knows we're in an issue. Second thing he did was, a week and a half later, order a state of emergency in 9 counties. And what he's trying to do there is to rescue the agricultural economy from collapsing in this year in these 9 counties, and basically is directing water transfers and reoperations of the state system to help provide water during these key months so that they don't lose crops and crop production, because as you all know too, there's a food issue going on as well. So what is Metropolitan? How does this play into Metropolitan? Well, the Central Valley Project, which is the primary agricultural water provider, where these counties draw water from, they may borrow up to 35,000 acre-feet out of San Luis Reservoir. That's a shared reservoir with the State Water Project. So that may be, for a short term, 35,000 acre-feet less that's available to the state water contractors, of which Metropolitan is one. Second thing is Metropolitan agreed to do what's called a source shift, to use our resources that we invested in to make water available to the farmers during this summer period, with the promise of repayment of the water before the end of the year. So it's just a shift in time of water with some compensation. Here I have Westland's Water District. They're going to be the primary source shifter. They're up in the Central Valley. They would pay Metropolitan $35 an acre foot so that we can move our operations around to free up water for them, and then they would return that at the end of the year. Third, we're also going to facilitate the introduction of groundwater that they're pumping into the California aqueduct. And they're actually going to pay a 10% mitigation fee in water to the State Water Project for doing that. So we pick up 1 acre foot for every 10, but more importantly, we put in some very strict controls on what water quality impacts can be generated by these types of transfers. So those are the 3 things that Metropolitan's doing to help enable the governor's drought and emergency declarations. So what is this 5-year supply plan? We're engaged to really cooperate with the member agencies and identify actions to supplement water supplies in the short term. We're focused in 2 different areas with 4 parts. Local actions, we want to encourage conservation, and we're doing this through a number of different arenas, but trying to organize it through this water supply plan. And local projects. Your general manager mentioned that increasing recycled water use is a positive for Glendale. What I can stand here and tell you is that part of this 5-year supply plan, we're looking to help enable through cooperative funding partnerships of that infrastructure that you're talking about, to enable that use to move forward into the next 5 years when we have the most problems here. So that type of work is being done. We'll certainly coordinate with your water staff to try and enable and identify where that can be done. On the imported side, I talked about Delta improvements and then the transfers. We're still heavily engaged in the transfers. There's going to be one complicating measure here, is that the governor is going to create a governor's drought water bank. And whereas before there was more of an open market and Metropolitan was an individual player in that market, now it's going to be a statewide run market. So there may be some additional rules and restrictions that can help or hurt that situation, and we'll have to see how that shapes up. So how can you help as a local agency commission? Hopefully I've done a good job in explaining that we do have a water crisis and that it's real, and that this is not just crying wolf. Second, understand that reducing water use can help our reserves, and so any support in the conservation, local resources, and the ordinance side in particular can be very helpful for how Southern California gets through this issue. Third, I always have a hard time with this, but I think this is happening everywhere. You have to understand that cost and rate pressures are rising. Your general manager talked about a projected rate increase for Metropolitan. That doesn't include these emergency measures that I'm talking about, the high-cost transfers, the high cost for alternative supplies, and that very common dynamic of high capital intensive businesses. If conservation is successful, revenues are going to drop. Unit rates need to increase to cover overall revenue requirements. That's a necessary outcome if these conservation things are successful. It's just important that you understand that that's going to happen and that can increase rates out into the future. So what about the future? It's not as dismal as I stand here and talk about the next 5 years. With regard to the Colorado River, we've done an excellent job of contracting and identifying the programs that are going to get us back up to full conveyance on the aqueduct when we need it. Some key things, we secured what they call lake mead banking, storage in Lake Mead, so when we do have extra water, we have a great deal more storage on that system. And California, in a December agreement, was protected in terms of its senior water right on the Colorado River. Arizona and Nevada will have to take any shortages first before California is affected. That's important to us as we go forward. It's a senior water right. We have it. It was affirmed through this process. In terms of the Bay Delta, two big processes going on. They're both identifying the same solution in terms of fixing the delta. That's a dual conveyance system, includes something known as the peripheral canal, as well as in-delta improvements. That solution is coming out through both the Bay Delta Conservation Plan, which is an ecosystem-based habitat conservation plan, and through the Governor's Delta Vision process, which is his blue ribbon committee, essentially, to address delta issues. We've also just kicked off the Integrated Resources Plan update, trying to identify what we need to do in the future to maintain reliability. So we think the future still has promise. The current situation is a crisis. We're engaged in different areas to address that crisis, but the situation is serious. And so with that, I think I've summarized and re-summarized these points. With that, I'd love to take questions.
I have a couple questions for you, and I don't know if they should be directed to you or to Peter or somebody else, but
I'll take the easy ones.
Okay. I mean, MWD was created, 80 years ago, 90 years ago, however long
80.
ago, 80 years ago roughly, and they did a great job getting us water, but it doesn't seem like they've kept up with the growth of the population and being able to supply water to Southern California in different areas. And from what you've presented today, it doesn't appear that there's a plan to meet the need for the growing population. I don't think conservation's not necessarily going to do it. Fixing the delta, is that really going to do it? I mean, it doesn't seem like we've been presented a plan here today that'll really solve the problem, and maybe today's not the right time, of our needs for water. If I cut my water back by 50%, is that going to solve the problem?
I think you brought up a good point. I will say that through the 1996 Integrated Resources Plan, I think we did identify a solid, comprehensive plan for moving forward. What's being layered on here are some things that, frankly, we didn't plan for. When we talked about improvements on the State Water Project and the supplies that was going to bring, we didn't anticipate that we would be in a condition where, when water was available, to store in the 4.5 million acre-feet of storage capacity that we've developed since 1990, we didn't anticipate that was going to be cut off by environmental restrictions. These are new conditions, changing conditions. So when we made a plan and invested for reliability for the future, there were some, what some people might call fatal flaws, but hard to foresee, especially when you're trying to balance out what we're willing to invest for a level of reliability. You can't assume that all your supplies are going to be gone in the future and then double or triple invest. I probably didn't do as good a job of tying together what is the plan. I think what I'm trying to do is tell you that in the next 5 years, we're heavily focused on getting through that 5 years while we also execute this Integrated Resources Plan update, where we can continue to look out into the future and look at the way we do business on the local level. It's going to be a combination. How we get through the future is going to be a combination of fixing the delta, of effecting a good water transfer market, of incentivizing and building local supplies that are available for local sustainability, and creating that new water use ethic that, frankly, it doesn't exist yet. If people waste water down the streets, that means the water use ethic isn't there. If you can get that in year after year, that reduces the future demand and then allows us to balance those supplies in those areas a lot more effectively.
With regard to fixing the delta, perhaps I don't understand it because I'm not in this every day.
Yes.
But what is broken? I mean, you have the smelt fish and you have the other fish. Is that the only problem, or are there other problems with the delta that need to be fixed that's part of that plan?
There's a number of problems with the delta, and I think that's why, I know that's why the governor has deployed 2 different processes to try and fix that. The Bay Delta Conservation Plan, I think, recognizes that this is a multi-species issue. The delta is a huge place. It's an estuary for the major drainage in California. So fixing the environmental issues isn't going piecemeal one by one. First fix the smelt, then fix the salmon. It's creating a sustainable habitat that can then sustain water operations for the good of for California, not just Southern California, for the Central Valley farmers. And then the Delta Vision also includes the emergency outages because people are very heavily reliant on the Delta. So the solution there that has been identified is something they call dual conveyance, a way of moving water around the Delta, around the environmental constraints when it's prudent, and then through the Delta when it's necessary to maintain Delta flow salinity and habitat. So it's not as though a solution doesn't exist. Getting to that solution through all of the political layers that need to be done is the more difficult part. I'm more confident that there's going to be a solution than I was, say, 5 years ago, precisely because of this Bay Delta Vision process and the Bay Delta Conservation Plan.
Can you use recycled water for agriculture?
You can in some agriculture. Just a case in point, San Diego County Water Authority, some of their agriculture is sensitive to salt. When you recycle water, usually your influent has high salinity levels, and recycling the water doesn't get rid of those salinity levels. So some agriculture can use it, some cannot, and I think what we're trying to do is explore how recycled water can be used best for different currently potable uses to offset in the future. But all areas we're looking at.
Thank you.
I had a question for you. It's not really clear to me from your presentation what surety you or we have that the actions that MWD will take will balance supply with demand and restore the vacant storage that you currently have. You talked about conservation and a number of other measures you're taking, but how much are you going to get from that in order really to restore supply and demand? Or how reliable of an estimate can you provide for that? Part of what prompted our invitation for you to come was that we're not particularly impressed with the way voluntary conservation has worked in our own community, despite the measures that have been taken. We're going to get another report on it here shortly after you speak. So, and of course, we appreciate everything you're saying about what's happening region-wide, but it's not really clear that we're going to get much from conservation, based on our own experience. So perhaps you could comment on that.
I can. Well, first in terms of surety, my primary message is there is no surety. We're basically at risk, and that's why the components of the presentation were there. It's not out of the question that we execute all of these plans. We'll still have to enter an allocation of water supplies. So I don't want to leave here with the impression that if we do this, everything will be fine. Don't worry about it. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm saying that these things will help. Everything is it's a probability. There's a chance that even if we don't do anything, we're not going to have an allocation because it'll snow enough and we'll be able to deliver enough water even with the restrictions. That's less of a chance, though, than the chance that we're going to have to take more water out of storage, and maybe more than what we currently have, and then would have to enter an allocation. With regard to the question about conservation, I think Metropolitan also does share that view that systematic conservation through our funding programs, that's effective. Toilets go in, that is saving water. Messaging through outreach, it can help because people become more aware of the issue and how to save water, but it's unclear on how much that's saving. I think what we're saying is ordinance-based conservation savings is going to be more effective than voluntary savings. So the more effective that the local agencies are at picking out restricted water uses and passing ordinances and enforcing those ordinances, then you'll start to see the water reductions that we might have formerly hoped would happen through voluntary conservation savings.
Well, this is rather heavy language to use, but I think we're failing the community to some extent if we can't provide equivalent assurance as we did in previous decades when your agency, for example, was first formed to be able to meet water demands. We've somehow got to do a better job at that. You talked about water transfers, and does that include transfers from the Central Valley Project? You actually talked more about giving water to the Central Valley Project from the State Water Project. What kind of transfers are we looking at? You mentioned 155,000 acre-feet anticipated.
This year, what we've done is enter contracts with some farmers, rice farmers north of the Delta, and this water was not as available because rice prices are actually at a historic high now, so we had less willing sellers. But we did purchase water from north of the Delta.
Okay.
We purchased water from south of Delta users, it's mostly State Water Project users, so moving water from their use to our use, it's mostly ag to urban. We have entered some agreements on the Colorado River. One was to jointly fund what we call the Drop 2 reservoir in the Imperial Irrigation District. What that did was free up system water that then was transferred back to Metropolitan. So we search a number of different avenues for moving water from a former use to urban use, and that's what we refer to as water transfers. Keep in mind, though, that as the market gets tighter, as more and more people have less water, the price increases and the availability drops. That's the transfers that I'm referring to.
You spoke mostly of transfers from within the State Water Project system itself or from the Colorado River system. Are there any that you envision in the Central Valley Project?
There are some, but keep in mind that the Central Valley Project, even now, is at a depleted state where the governor felt that he had to declare a state of emergency. Basically, what's happening there is that water's not available. Things have changed, though. I mean, the market is dynamic year to year. It depends on what crops they're planting, and frankly, what kind of crops they lose this year. A lot of farmers are in permanent crops, trees, etc. If they lose those trees, they're not going to have those trees the next year or the year after. So that market is dynamic, but Central Valley Project transfers are part of the overall portfolio and what we look at.
And the Metropolitan Water District is being aggressive in identifying and exploiting any opportunities for transfers at this time, I take it.
Yeah, we are, and just to give you a little bit of further insight, through that 5-year plan, we're also exploring different policy avenues for willing seller, willing buyer within the district also, because some of these prices are higher, frankly, than some of our agencies are willing to pay, but not higher than some of our other agencies are willing to pay. So I think the takeaway message here is we're aggressively pursuing those, and we're also open to policy changes to try and affect the most efficient water transfer market that we can have for our agencies.
What would you say is the probability of Metropolitan going to a water supply allocation mode in the next 2 years?
Through the 5-year plan, we started with a baseline analysis that said if we do nothing, and that all of the interruptible replenishment demands that we've been delivering come back onto Metropolitan as firm demands, so in other words, the groundwater basins get depleted, so they need Metropolitan water, that we would be looking at a 40% probability of not having enough supply and entering an allocation. Through everything that I've identified for you through the 5-year plan, we think that we can reduce that probability to probably a 20% chance. And so that's what I meant by a range of probability. There's still an 80% chance that we wouldn't have to enter an allocation. So that's about the numbers that we're working with right now. Keep in mind, things change, though, when it starts raining and water can be moved. Just as a point of kind of information, our state water project supplies, even under the restrictions, next year are expected to range anywhere from 400,000 acre-feet all the way up to 1.7 million, 1.8 million acre-feet. So when you see a gap of 800,000 acre-feet and you say, my God, how are we going to make that up? Sometimes Mother Nature makes that up for us, more often than not. So it's a eye-opening situation, and we need to stay on top of it, and I think we are. and happy to have the opportunity to keep you informed on that.
Well, I appreciate everything Met is doing, especially in reducing that probability down by a factor of 50%, apparently, from 40% to 20%, and we hope you'll continue exploiting any opportunities you can, because it's a very nerve-wracking situation we're in, I think. We'll hear more later on the subject in terms of what Glendale's doing. I don't have any other comments. Thank you very much for your
Thank you for the
presentation.
invitation.
Our next item.
Water reports, conservation update, water conservation ordinance review, and Chevy Chase 968 reservoir update.
Mr. President, members of Commission, hello, my name is Atine Hartunian, and I'm here to present our update on our water conservation efforts. As you can see from our production chart, our first slide is our production chart, as you can see. Our June production was up, May production was up 8.3%, and our June production was actually down 1.3%, getting us a little bit closer to our 10% goal. The next slide shows our customer water usage savings for overall customer base, and these numbers are just preliminary. However, if you recall, single family represents about 45% of consumers in the city. This first one right here. Multifamily represents 35%, and small business 2%. And irrigation meters, although this bar might be a bit misleading, only accounts for 3% of water consumers in the city. So it does show that there's an overall savings of about 6% in reduction since September of 2007 through our customer groups. The following slide is a listing of our recent outreach and conservation efforts. As we know, the governor issued a press release or executive order on June 11th declaring a drought. Following that, we issued a press release on our water supply alert. And we did get coverage in the Glendale News Press following that press release, where they provided consumers with tips on water conservation. We recently uploaded our water conservation site, and I'll be showing you a few pages from that site in the next few slides. We have worked with KABC to provide flashing conservation messages on their Jumbotron that you can see from the 5 North and 134 freeways. I just finished an interview with Horizon Armenian Television, which will be airing tonight, and it's an Armenian interview on water conservation efforts and some of our programs, and that reaches about 30,000 residents in Glendale. And we have worked with planning on drafting a motion to City Council to update our current landscape ordinance to include the flexibility of Xeriscape or California-friendly gardens, and that will go to City Council on July 12th. I just wanted to touch base on two programs that we have on water conservation and how those two are doing at this time. The first one is the Glendale Water Power Energy and Water Survey Program. It provides our customers with free in-home surveys and installs $50 worth of energy and water-saving devices, at the same time educating customers on conservation. Since July 1st, 2007 through June, we've installed the following water-saving devices in addition to energy-saving devices, but we're just focusing on the water-saving devices, which have saved us about 7 million gallons or 22 acre-feet in the last fiscal year. The program has been in place since 2001, and we have had a lot more interest from apartment building owners in this program. The next program is our Smart Home Rebate Program. Again, it's been in effect since 2001. We currently offer rebates on dishwashers, clothes washers, and ultra-low and dual-flush toilets. We just signed an agreement with Metropolitan Water District to provide rebates on smart irrigation controllers, rotating sprinkler heads, and high-efficiency toilets. So customers can also go through our program or MWD's program to obtain these rebates. This is a snapshot of our Glendale Water and Power homepage. As you can see, our customers can link to our water conservation page from the two links. The one at the top, where it's Water Don't Waste It, this is a flashing icon that has different conservation messages or different programs that we offer. The right one is stagnant, so customers can just click on that, and once they do, it goes to the next site, which is our water conservation site. And this provides customers with information on water conservation programs, quick tips, more long-term tips. And we are in the process of updating our website, so this is a little bit boring looking at the moment, but we are working with IS on updating our website to have more visuals, more pictures, and we do have a listing of California-friendly plants, and then we'll provide pictures of those where customers can take printouts to local nurseries to purchase those plants. Some of our next steps include a Tri-City meeting with Burbank, Pasadena, and Glendale next week to discuss conservation outreach, share materials, and brainstorm new conservation ideas and how we can work together on increasing customer awareness. We're also working with Metropolitan and using their outreach materials for their campaign, which they are starting their new campaign July 14th, am I right? That'll start on Monday, so we are going to be sharing some of their materials, and they are taking extensive radio and print ads to issue alerts for customers. Our source newsletter will be going out in August 08, which will include our ordinance, information on the water alert, outdoor and indoor tips, and where customers can also call to report a water waster. And lastly, we are researching outdoor advertising opportunities with the Beeline and Beeline bus stops and bus advertisements. That is my update.
Questions?
A quick question, once again, on conservation issue, because for some reason that's really getting to me right now, and I apologize for that. But the source materials, people look at them, they skim them, they throw them away. At least that's what my friends do. They often joke when there's a picture of me in it or something, but that's about as far as it goes. Has there been thought of sending out a postcard or sending out something in red or orange or something that will grab people's attention and say, if you flush your toilet less, if you turn your sprinklers back by a minute every day or 2 minutes every day, you'll save this amount of water or you'll save this amount of money. Something that'll be something simple, people have short attention spans, that will, maybe hit home a little harder than burying it in the bill or burying it in the source or something to that effect.
We are considering that, and that's another reason we're having this meeting next week, is to see what works for other cities before we go ahead and do a mass mailing like that. But we definitely are looking into different options of sending information out to customers. The source, for the most part, is a pretty good publication. The customers comment on it. They call us immediately the next day if there's something featured in the program. Unfortunately, there are customers that don't read it and throw it away. So we do try to find different ways of reaching out to customers, and we can definitely consider a direct mailing piece versus a bill insert or the source.
In all the materials that have been prepared and generated and circulated around to date, perhaps I've missed it, but has there been, if you turn off your sprinklers, reduce it by a minute, reduce it by 2 minutes, you'll save this amount of money or you'll save this amount of water? I personally don't recall ever seeing that, and it'd be interesting to see. If you look at my grass, it's turning brown, so I'm already turning it back.
Right.
But I don't think a lot of people are. I think a lot of people are saying, oh yeah, there's a problem, I won't do anything until it's mandatory. Had they known that they could reduce it by a minute or 2 minutes for their landscaping, I think people might spend a little more time thinking about it and actually doing it.
We've had it in the past, but we can kind of pull that out and make it a little bit more prominent because landscape usage is 60-70% of the water in a household. So we have recommended them reducing the time and also adjusting their sprinklers so they're not watering walkways and don't have runoff in the streets. So, and that's another thing that we're encouraging our customers to report a water waster if they see their neighbors, or it's not really policing, but if they see their neighbors, customers or sprinklers are running water off into the street, they can call us, and we do send a letter or give the customer a call and just advise them that they need to adjust their sprinklers.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a comment. This is my first time on the commission. I'm not really aware of the outreach activities that you're currently doing with schools. I know that children, are a great way of passing the message on to the parents. Can we go to the schools more, maybe encourage teachers to create programs, some sort of incentive program, like if the children are able to ask the parents to conserve a certain amount, they get something and, reward or an award or something. Have we thought of anything like that? Is the Living Wise program water conservation?
We do have the Living Wise program. I just wanted to confirm if it was water conservation as well. But it is a program that we have with 6th graders where we go out into the classrooms. It's a different company, a contractor. And they take in energy-efficient light bulbs and shower heads and faucet aerators, and they teach the kids how to install them, and they take them home and they share that with their parents. Now, that is at the 6th grade level. We can look into options of maybe going down a little bit in elementary school levels and having some sort of a challenge or educating them on water conservation. But, if any teachers or principals call us, we do sometimes also go out to the schools and make presentations. We had a traveling water pirates show that we would go to different schools last year and put on about 20 to 30-minute presentations on water conservation, the importance of conservation. And last year we also invited schools to our power plant where we talked about water and energy conservation.
Thank you.
We had a presentation here from the MWD representative in which he mentioned a number of recommendations regarding conservation. Have we implemented all of those in Glendale?
We have implemented most of them, and we are, again, working with MWD more closely on this next campaign that they will be launching. We are in talks with them and trying to see what materials we can use alongside MWD because they are airing their radio spots, so we want to see how we can take that information and apply it to Glendale.
We revised our drought ordinance, I suppose, to reflect best-of-breed type of solutions in the community.
Mm-hmm. We are currently in the process of revising it, as Craig might talk about in the next, after my presentation. He can address that.
Was there thought of being given to talking to other communities besides Burbank and Pasadena? I realize that they're nearby, but we read in the news about Long Beach or Los Angeles and activities they're doing. Are you following up on that?
We do follow up with them, and that's another reason we work with Metropolitan, because Metropolitan kind of follows what everyone else is doing,
right.
and their website also includes all that information.
Yeah.
So we definitely share the information, and we do attend MWD meetings monthly where we all discuss our conservation outreach efforts together. And this is just the first step with Burbank and Pasadena, and if that works very well, we might definitely encourage LA and other surrounding cities.
In Los Angeles, they have this drought buster team, which I'm sure you've heard about. Glendale has something similar.
We don't call ourselves drought busters at the moment, nor police.
Well, the name doesn't matter.
But
it's the
yes,
function.
we do issue letters and call customers when they are reported as a water waster. Yes, and sometimes we do in-home visits as well.
MWD commented on the probability of moving to a water supply allocation mode, which would be, I think, the equivalent of a mandatory conservation mode for a retail agency such as GWP. Do we have any sense about what the probability would be of our being in a mandatory conservation mode in the next 2 years?
I don't want to put Tina on the spot. Depending upon the conditions, of course. If the conditions continue as they are within the next 2 years, I would say the probability is better than 50%, certainly. Yes.
It might be worthwhile making sure customers are informed of that.
Definitely.
Yeah, because we'd want to do what we can to avoid that. I have no other comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Next item.
Water conservation ordinance review.
Mr. President, Commissioners, I'm Craig Keenan, Public Benefit Programs Marketing Manager. I hope Bettini didn't set the stage too high here, because I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what our schedule is on the ordinance, because we haven't actually seen the revisions yet. We will get a first draft from the consultants we hired to take a look at our ordinance on July 14th. The schedule is for us to review that draft, make recommendations. They will come back again on the 24th with a second draft and a final version at the end of the month. And I would think we would share that with the Commission after we get that final version. The next steps after that is, if we have to do a Prop 218 process or not, and we still have to go to council and do a ordinance revision, which takes 5 weeks. So that's where we're at right now. Details.
Please. Go ahead.
I read in the past where we had some kind of existing ordinance on the different steps. I think I saw Peter's, Mr. Kavunas' televised interview about different steps of conservation, voluntary to mandatory conservation. So why don't we build upon that and maybe even start letting the public know that this is what it takes. I mean, at certain trigger points where it becomes mandatory, and I assume the new ordinance would contain those trigger points.
Yes, it will. It's going to have tiered things where you go in stages, and the penalties are more and more for your get higher and higher each stage as far as.
Can you quickly review those stages? I mean, within a few minutes, because I like to know them. I mean, at what stage do we move on to the next level?
Well, that's what's being reviewed too. I won't see that until July 14th.
Oh, it's not based upon our existing ordinance where we have those different stages already? Because I thought we have something, an existing ordinance.
You do have an ordinance that it does go in stages, but I haven't seen what the consultants are going to recommend. I don't know if it's going to be the same number of stages or additional stages or where the trigger points will be. The current ordinance is set, basically, it's to compare usage from one year to a previous year, and our billing system can't do that anymore. That's why we're doing the update, so we can have it price or consumption based and price driven. And so we'll see. Like I said, I don't have any real details on it yet.
Okay, because I was going to ask a lot of questions during this segment, but since you don't have it.
I'm sorry.
It relates to the MWD's presentation where we have a lot of, when we get to an allocation point, what can we do to speed up even the AMI process? Because we're going to put in some AMI to track these real-term pricing for water, so people know they're going to pay higher cost for water. They'll try to reduce and conserve.
Right.
So what can we do even before then to speed up that process to help with the demand response?
Well, with the AMI process, we'll have our report from that consultant this month.
Same consultant?
No, it's a different one. We're working with KEMA on the AMI. This was Brown and Caldwell for the ordinance, water conservation ordinance update. But we will have a technology plan and a business case from them this month, and we're scheduled to give you a presentation on that at the August commission meeting.
Okay, so I would be interested to combining all these projects that we're working on, because the ordinance will impact certain areas, but AMI could impact the ordinance. If we put in AMI sooner, then that could reduce the demand or the conservation efforts, thereby make the ordinance obsolete, because if we conserve as much, then we wouldn't need the ordinance to go into mandatory allocation.
Well, what we are doing with AMI, water is ahead of the curve on AMI. We have a project in place that will replace all of the water meters over the course of the next 2 years, and those water meters will include the AMI technology. So the only thing we're waiting for right now is the report from KEMA to tell us which technology is the right one, and then once we do that, then we will go forth, and I believe we're still on track for the next 2 years. Is that right, Peter? So that's an accelerated project, so it's to your point, that will help us quite a bit in that regard.
The 2 years, the accelerated schedule.
Yes.
But in the meantime, we have to update the ordinance to use the system we have in place. So.
Okay.
So we may then have to update it again when AMI is in to take advantage of the newer technologies when they are.
So the old ordinance is based on consumption comparative from year to year, but the new ordinance, you want to get away from that?
It would trigger penalties that would, your consumption would be compared to a base year, and it would trigger penalties if you use more than whatever the level was. Well, our billing system, we have trouble doing that comparison in an accurate way, and so we have to go to a different system that it's triggered. You just basically, the rate or the surcharge goes up with each tier, so people get charged more based on their current usage, and it's not based on some comparison to some historic amount. So that's what we're doing with this ordinance, is to come up with a method that you can still have tiers, it'll be price driven, and it won't require us to do that comparison. Because I believe it was back in 92 or 3, or it was before I was here, that they had to do that kind of thing, and there was so many questions as to whether or not the penalties that people were charged were actually the ones that they should have been. So they would they would ask for us to review things. It caused trouble, so.
We're routinely failing our water conservation targets. I think it's safe to say. Is there some way of accelerating the revision that you're discussing?
Well, this is the quickest we can get it done right now.
Okay. All right.
There may be, I don't know, legally, if the ordinance could be an emergency type ordinance, I guess that could be implemented quicker. But typically, you have a 3-week process to get on the council agenda. Then you have 1 week where you have to go back to the council, and then 4 weeks more before the ordinance takes effect.
All right.
And the 218 process, there's a question of whether or not we may have to do another 218 process, or whether or not we can rely on the one we did during the last rate increase. So that's a 45-day addition there.
Well, thanks for being diligent.
I just wanted to come up and give you the schedule update, because I know this has been on here for a month, and I didn't expect all those tough questions.
Maybe the last question.
That's what we're being paid for, or not being paid for.
Right.
All right, thank you. Next item. By the way, let me point out it's 4 o'clock. I think we're supposed to end by 4:30. Is that correct?
That's true.
Yeah, so we need to accelerate our discussion here. If I could ask everybody to try to be quick. Thank you. Next item, Sheila.
Chevy Chase 968 Reservoir update.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission. Peter Kavunas, Water Services Administrator. A brief update on Chevy Chase 968 Reservoir. Project's proceeding. The contractor is hard at work. We're 42 days behind schedule. We've had no community complaints in the last month.
Congratulations on the lack of community complaints. That's positive news.
We work hard at that. By the way of concrete progress, you'll recall the pump station is going to be relocated to be adjacent to the new reservoir, and for the new commissioner, we'll have an opportunity to give you a full briefing on the project. The floor of the pump station has now been poured, and we're moving full speed ahead.
Very good.
Where are we at with working Saturdays? Where was that left?
The environmental documentation has been developed, and the city's considering whether to proceed with that proposal or not. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next item.
Customer service update.
President Miller, members of Commission, Tammy Valier, Customer Services Administrator. I will be very quick. I just have a few things that I want to follow up on from previous meetings. The first is from the last meeting when Melissa Benson was presenting the eCare, the interactive website that we have for customers. A question came up about how many customers access that site per month, and an average of 7,623 customers per month access that site. That's about 91,000 customers per year. That is about how many customers we actually help over the telephone. I think it's a very impressive number. It shows that our customers are very progressive. Out of that number of customers, about 55% of them are making payments while they're in the system, which leaves a large percentage of them doing other things within the site, using other tools, looking at past usage, etc. So we'll continue to look for additional and more flexible ways for customers to do business with us. I'll track those statistics on a regular basis now, and if I see any fluctuation in the trends, increase, decrease, I'll be sure to report that to you. The next update was on the new bill format, which was the bill that will reflect 100 cubic feet and convert into gallons, and also had a bar chart showing the last year's usage. I really had hoped that this would have been in place about a month ago. We had some programming issues, but I'm happy to report that as of Monday, we started billing the new statements with this information on it. Again, that was an excellent suggestion by one of our citizens, and I think it's really going to help customers understand the bill better, and I hope to get more customer feedback once they start to see the bills, and I'll share that with you as well. In the past 2 weeks, we've had about an 8% increase in customers calling regarding high bills. And this is pretty typical for this time of year, the first heat wave, and those bills start coming in. People are surprised by their usage.
But the customer reps have given us feedback that it's different this time. The customers are really scrutinizing their bills. They're scrutinizing the components of the bill, including the rubbish, sewer, hazardous waste charges. I think it's really reflective of the economical times that we're experiencing, and with the fuel adjustment and water adjustment rate increases, we anticipate that this is just going to increase even more so. So staff has been trained. They're prepared to assist customers with questions. So just that's something that we think is just going to increase throughout the rest of this year. And finally, customer services is working on a business case for providing monthly billing to our customers. Approximately 95% of our customers are currently billed bi-monthly. There's pros and cons for billing either way, and there's some alternatives that we're also going to consider. Whether monthly billing is something we decide to do or not, we just want you to know that we're really taking a good hard look at it. We're going to look at cost, customer service, a combination of both, and that analysis will be reported to you next month.
Thanks, Tammy. I do have a question.
Sure.
I was reviewing the biweekly status report, and I see a lot of the stats that you just reported. And I was just wondering, do you monitor the stat of, like, service level, like what percentage of the calls are you able to answer within 1 minute?
We do. Actually, our goal is 80% of our calls answered within 30 seconds.
30 seconds.
And that is on a quarterly report that I present to Commission, and I'd be happy to give you a copy of the last quarter.
Yes, that'd be great.
All of that information.
Thanks.
Thank you very much. Next item.
Under Power, the load growth report by Ned Basson.
Commission President, members of the Commission, I'm Ned Basson. Before I do the report, I just have one item that I wanted to update you on. Yesterday, as you know, we burn landfill gas from Shoal Canyon, and there's a pipeline that runs to the power plant for that. Outside the power plant yesterday, a contractor was digging, and he cut into that into that line. We had the power, or we had the compressors to that line turned off. Some landfill gas was escaping. The fire department was on the scene very quickly. The pressure to the line decayed, and the incident ended. We expect to have the landfill gas line back in service. It's not our line, and we're not the ones repairing it, but we understand it will be repaired within the next couple of days, so we'll be able to burn the landfill gas again. My presentation is serving the load growth in Glendale, and it is at a previous commission meeting. We were asked how we're serving the load growth. As part of a review from a earlier presentation that was giving, our resources, electrical resources, can be divided into two categories: local resources and remote resources. The local resources represent about 292 megawatts of power available, and the remote is 143 for a total of 435 megawatts. If you look at what our highest load was, it occurred 2 years ago, and it was 336 megawatts. That was the peak load, that highest we've experienced. Up until about that time, 315 megawatts was our peak load, which was experienced in 1998. 2 years ago, when we had the 336 megawatts, you may recall that we had a prolonged and very high temperature period. It was considered to be a once in a 50-year event. So the 336 is our target peak load. For that, we also then plan a planning reserve amount, which brings us up to about 405 megawatts, and our capacity is 435 megawatts. So we have more capacity than our planning reserve requirement, which should allow us easily to meet our peak load requirements. The question that was asked came after some other presentations. You see the Americana has opened, and you see some other construction work going on in Glendale, and so the question was, well, with all of this new addition, what effect might it have? And the downtown growth specific plan shows the Americana at 6 to 8 megawatts, and I call that potential. The reason it's potential is that the way that is rated is based on transformer size. Size of the transformer is to provide more capability than what we would expect the facility to need. There's two transformers. One is for commercial properties there, and the other is for residential. And you do not expect both of them to have peak loads at the same time. So even though it's 6 to 8 megawatts in what our distribution people need to do for planning, the effect on our electric supply requirement is quite a bit less than that. There's others on the plan for a potential of 13 megawatts, new load of 4 megawatts in this next coming year. Remember, this 4 megawatts is potential. It's based on transformer size, not on what we would actually expect to see. There's another 9 megawatts of potential, but there's no schedule. So I don't expect that to be a load on us in the next year, probably next 2 or 3 years. So the estimated new load for downtown is 18 to 20 megawatts of potential. The actual number that we would expect to see would be probably less than 8 to 10. You go outside of downtown, we have 2 big customers that are indicating in their preliminary planning that there will be a total, again, of a potential of 7 to 10 megawatts. There's no definite date for their construction, and so, again, I don't expect that this next year. We're talking another 2 or 3 years. Also, you may remember that we have targeted demand-side management and energy efficiency for reduction over the next 3 years of 9 megawatts. So kind of assuming that some of these counterbalance, what happens if my 336 megawatt number is wrong and we really see 346? It could go up to 346. We have 435 megawatts of capacity. You may recall that probably 6 months ago we purchased or entered into a participation agreement for energy from Pebble Springs wind farm up in Oregon, and that will give us 20 megawatts, but it's as the wind blows. That doesn't count as our capacity. It provides energy, but we are in the process of firming that up so that we can count on it as capacity, and we think that under the firm conditions for the summer we'll get about 10 megawatts. So we think by the summer of 2009 our capability would be up to 445 megawatts. So suppose we're really having, instead of 336, we're really at 346. Our planning reserve then would be about 415, but we will have about 445 megawatts. So that's how, from a capacity standpoint, we're planning to serve the needs of Glendale. I'll take any questions on that. Otherwise, Ramon will talk about the distribution portion for serving those needs.
Well, I guess maybe this is what you're going to address, Ramon, but is your transmission and distribution infrastructure up to meeting what your generation can do? And I see you standing up.
Good afternoon, President Miller, members of the Commission, Ramon Abueg. Anyway, so Ned's job is to bring the energy into the city, and then he transfers it over to me to make sure I can distribute the energy to the houses, the different businesses. So the areas of growth that he explained earlier, which includes Americana, the downtown development, the downtown plan. Our job is to make sure, again, to deliver power. So what we've done using the downtown plan is we have actually, when we developed the distribution system for Americana, I'll show some diagrams, we rebuilt that or developed that such that the development in all of downtown will be supported. And so we have distribution systems coming from different substations to be able to bring power in locally to the different businesses and residents. The other projects that Ned mentioned, the unidentified one, like about 13 more megawatts coming in, we know where they're going. We know how much load they would demand. We have identified what substations, what feeders they're going to be fed from, but we haven't built all of it because we don't know if these projects will come into fruition. So we're waiting for the planning for the permits to come in. Once they come in, we start building it. The two projects that he mentioned coming from two major customers, that would require a lot more work. Once it becomes real, it comes closer, it actually requires that we rebuild one new substation, or not new, but rebuild an existing substation to increase the capacity. The closest substation is a 4 kV substation. We have to rebuild it to 12 kV. And at the same time, bring in what we call tie points from other substations such that we can provide what we have been calling here at the N-1 condition, so that if we lose one service, we can continue to keep the lights on. So as an example of what I'm talking about, you've seen this diagram before. When we built the infrastructure for Americana, it's not just for Americana, it's actually for the whole downtown. So this infrastructure, when we built it, the main substation for downtown is Tropical Substation. But what we did is basically inside the vaults, or sometimes the poles, in this case mainly vaults, is we built what we call tie points. And so at any time, if we have any problem with, let's say, this substation, worst case, we'd be able to serve that coming from another substation. At the least case, if we lose any one of these feeder using these tie points here, just by switching, we should be able to pick up the load. This is the whole philosophy of what we're building into our system, is to be able to support it. If any of these lines go out for any particular problem, we should be able to continue service and at least bring the lights back on in a very short time. Okay. In the other area, you asked about transmission. If you recall, months ago, I can't remember now, it seems like forever now, we rebuilt the transmission line that went through northern Glendale that connected our Montrose substation to the Bel Air substation. That's a critical transmission project that we had to do in order to keep the voltage support on northern Glendale. That also is critical. We have two main lines coming from our GIS substation or Kellogg substation that goes through Rosemont, which is really one of the hubs that we have to serve the different substations. We are building another transmission line, a third transmission line, along this, such that if we lose any transmission line here, we won't be relying on backfeeding because this is a single transmission line through here. So the voltage support plus the additional capacitor and transmission line is going to help us to support most of North Glendale. Additionally, remember the old New York substation dilemma that we had that used to be here? We are not able to rebuild that substation. So what we have now is a situation where North Glendale is really islanded. There's no other substation supporting this. What we're doing, or what we've done, this area here that's fed by Glorieta substation, we have just completed rebuilding this area. There's been a lot of construction in the last 12 months in this area. All the distribution system within this area has been rebuilt to 12 kV. And after completing that, we are now in the process of looking at the substation at Glorieta. We're going to replace this substation. It's currently a 4 kV substation. We're going to upgrade to 12 kV. At the same time, we're going to increase the capacity to about 60, maybe 80 megawatts, depending on what we can do with the limited space that we have at that station. So the whole idea is we're going to eliminate the islanding problem that we have in North Glendale using Glorietta substation to help us support not only the Montrose substation, but be able to backfeed the areas surrounding it. And that also allows us to support any load growth that we may have in the commercial area in North Glendale. Okay. So, and a lot of there's also projects that we're looking at, such that we start upgrading our 34 kV sub-transmission system within Glendale to 69 kV, so we gain more efficiency. And that's all part of the 5-year plan, which I believe we just sent you the latest copy. Next month, we'll be giving you an update on what's in that plan to integrate everything to show you where we're going with this long term.
Very good. Thank you.
Quick question for you, actually. There's two new developments just north of the 134. One is Embassy Suites, the hotel, and the other one is a commercial, I don't know what it's called, commercial office building or something.
Yes.
What substations feed those, and have they been updated, such as the ones that supplied Tropico and whatever supplied to Americana?
The answer is yes.
Okay.
The Embassy Suites will be fed from Rosamond substation, and that project's been going on for a while. The infrastructure was built at least 2 years ago.
Okay.
It's just a matter of them coming online now.
And then the new commercial building that's located somewhere right in that neighborhood, is that also Rosamond, or is that another?
That's also Rosamond.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question.
Yes.
Earlier, with Ned's presentation, he indicated the September peak demand is forecasted to be about, or the capacity would be 446 or so. My question is, given that there are a lot of units, are being shut down for overhaul, upgrade, and what have you, 446, is that assuming all the units are up and running?
That is correct.
Okay. And that will be the case in September?
There will be some units down for maintenance. Not all the units are always running. Also, just want to also point out one important item that I think is important is we may have a peak of 336, but our system is always below 300 megawatts pretty much most of the year. There's probably 10 days, maybe 15 days in a year where we would go over 300 megawatts. So the system is really built up to, like Ned says, about 400 megawatts, but there's only 10 or 15 days in a year where we exceed 300 megawatts.
Have you looked at the chances of what a failure might be in September if you didn't have all of your capacity up and running? Are you?
Ned can probably answer that question better, but if we don't have the Grayson units running, we always have the ability to bring it in from the outside, so on spot market.
All right.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Good. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let me just comment. We have, as I understand, about 8 minutes left, and I feel a little bit apologetic, but some of these issues that were coming up earlier were of such importance that I really felt we couldn't give it short shrift. What I'll do is just continue on this agenda unless there was something that Director Steiger would like to have go forward first.
No, I think we're okay if we...
Then the next item.
Speak quickly.
Under power, we have the green power rate and the experience of the power of solar.
Ray Keenan, PBC Marketing Manager. Mr. President, Commission members. What we've asked the City Council is to approve a new green power program. We're going to call it Green Partners. It goes to Council on July 15th. The program will offer electric customers an opportunity to purchase green power at a reasonable rate, and the funding that we bring in will go towards additional purchases to support the RPS. The rate is based on the firm cost of power from the new Pebble Springs wind farm that should come online in January. The program will offer up to 56 million kilowatt hours on a first-come, first-served basis. Enrollment will start in August and continue through December 31st unless we need to close it sooner if we're reaching our limit as far as how much we can sell under this. Basically, the charge is a fixed charge that will substitute for the fuel adjustment charge on the bill. It's set at 10.39 cents. Right now, the fuel adjustment charge is at 7.18 cents. So it starts out at a, just over 3 cent premium. But as the fuel adjustment rises, since it's fixed, it will actually, we project, average about 1.2 cent premium over the 5-year period. So they're guaranteed to, and that's part of the draw of this kind of a program is they get a fixed amount. They're not going to have some sort of a charge that keeps going up with the fuel adjustment, because fuel adjustment is supposed to be for fossil fuels and those kind of things. So for a typical single-family household that wants to participate, you're looking at about $7.28 a month for green power. But it'll be open to all customers. And that's the program.
Any questions? All right. Thank you so much. Next item.
Experience the power of solar.
We're all running up here fast. I wanted to formally invite you to our Experience the Power of Solar event, which will take place on Monday, July 21st at Glendale Community College at 4 p.m. Formal invitations are in the mail, and I believe you received an email today from me with the invitation attached. The event is open to all Glendale residents. We will have city employees there, city council members, as well as the board of directors from Glendale Community College and representatives from Chevron, who will talk about the program, the installation, and the renewable aspect of it. And we will have a tour of the facility and information on just the solar panels themselves, and we'll have some on display that people can look at. It's a very educational and informative event, and we invite you all to attend.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to it.
Electrical services reliability indices.
I'll try to be quick. In June, we had a total of 7 outages that affected about 12,700 customers total, with a cumulative minutes of 544 minutes. Of those 7 outages, 3 outages were due to my favorite cause, the Mylar balloons, and that affected about 5,240 customers for about 43 minutes. One, actually, we had a bird that got in contact with our overhead facilities that caused an outage for about 45 minutes. And one outage was due to a tree branch. Actually, one of our tree trimming crews trimmed the branch and landed over the overhead wires. That caused an outage to about 635 customers for about 28 minutes. The 2 more serious failures or outages one was due to a cable outage. It's a 32-year-old cable that failed, and we have actually replaced those. That affected about 1,100 customers for about 153 minutes. And another failure was due to a landing failure, and there's a picture in your report. I actually have a show and tell here, but in the interest of time, I'll do that off camera. Show you what a landing is and what are the reasons why a landing may fail. It's a connection inside a vault, but I'll give you the details later. One of the questions that was asked in last month's presentation is we report the indices every month, and you wanted to know what our target is and how we compare with the industry. One of the index that we report is what we call the SIFI, which is the System Average Interruption Frequency Index. Our target for that is to have 1 outage per customer, basically on an average. In other words, we don't want to have a customer to experience more than 1 outage in 12 months. Right now, we're at about 0.84, which is under that, and the North American utilities the current average is about 1.1. And there's a graph in your report that showed how our trend has been in the last 3 years. Proud to say that we are meeting that goal and improving. Hopefully, we can only improve. The other index is the what we call the SIDI, or the System Average Interruption Duration Index. This is the average interruption that each of those customers will experience if there's an outage. Our goal is 40 minutes. Right now, we're at 35 minutes. And the industry, compared to the North American utilities, is about 90 minutes. So we're a lot better than most. And last but not least is the Customer Average Interruption Index, or CAIDI. That is, if the customer does indeed have an outage, we want the duration to be 40 minutes or under. Currently, our average is at 42 minutes. It's the first month in about 2 years that we're over our goal by 2 minutes. but we're still better than the most North American utilities. The current industry standard is about 90 minutes. So hopefully I didn't talk too fast.
I noticed the trend is going downwards, and you and your staff are to be commended for that, as I think we've commended you in the past. That's very good.
Thank you. I think the staff's working very hard to do that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, we have 1 minute.
Well, the presentation that Robert is going to give is probably 10 minutes long, and it's a very, very informative, and I think you'll appreciate seeing the presentation. So if we do have to end the meeting, can we we don't have the ability to go over, is that correct? Okay. Yeah, I would agree with that, because there's a lot of very good information on the greening of our fleet. So I think we should agendize that for right up front for the next. Yes.
Okay. Seeing that we have only half a minute or so left, I suppose we should have a motion to adjourn. I do want to apologize for not being able to cover everything here, especially to those of you who had oral communications. I would ask that you come the next time, or that if your matter is urgent, that you bring it up to the staff. Anyway, do we have a motion to adjourn then? Seconded?
Second.
I would like to thank everybody for attending and for all the work that the staff provided into the discussions and reports we had today. The date and place of our next meeting will be Monday, August 4th, 2008 at 4 p.m. in this room. Thank you very much.